All for joining us here today. I wanted to hold this press conference at Carmel Mall to highlight our incredible Somali businesses housed here.
So we got a lot to get into, ladies and gentlemen. The fraud that is being investigated in Minnesota right now. The FBI, they stepped in. And now, ladies and gentlemen, you even have an ex-employee investigator who was hired by the state to investigate fraud, red flags, suspicious activity, that sort of thing, speaking out because he sees what Tim Walz is saying on television, trying to take credit for all of the raids. And he's like, hold on now. I worked there. I told you guys all about this, and you did everything to silence me instead of shutting down the fraud that was eventually exposed by Nick Shirley that couldn't be hidden anymore. And so we got a lot to break down and get into. Don't forget, if you do enjoy that content, smash the thumbs up. That's the best way you can let me know. Subscribe to stay locked in with future videos. And so let's start here.
Tonight, the fallout following those sweeping federal raids related to alleged fraud. Our crews were there as agents raided daycares and autism centers across the metro Tuesday. And today, our crews went back to those scenes to try and answer the many questions that remain. Our team coverage begins with investigative reporter Kirsten Swanson. She started digging into the autism centers yesterday and found an interesting thread.
Federal prosecutors have previously said when someone owns multiple companies that bill Medicaid, it can be a red flag for fraud. Using business records and other publicly available documents, 5 investigators found dozens of people who fit that profile, including the president of one of the autism centers now under investigation. This nondescript office building in Minneapolis, the location of one of more than a dozen documented federal raids carried out Tuesday at daycares and autism centers. One of those autism centers.
Okay, so Aspen Associates.
We returned to today.
Okay. Suite 155.
To try to talk to Faisal Elmi. Business records from the Secretary of State, along with federal provider enrollment documents, identify him as president and manager of Aspen Associates. He's also listed as manager and owner of House of Opportunity. Both we found.
Aspen Associates, which was raided yesterday, and also House of Opportunity.
Located in Suite 155 with people inside.
This is Aspen Associates.
No one is here to talk to you.
No, I understand that, but this is Aspen Associates and House of Opportunity?
I don't know. You just have to talk to whoever's in charge, and they're not here right now.
Oh, that's Mr. Elmi?
Yeah.
You're saying that is Mr. Elmi that I need to speak with? You said you need to speak with someone in charge. I'm asking who that is.
There's a lot of people that are in charge. I don't know exactly, but you have to just come back and see, talk to whoever, okay?
Do you know who Mr. Elmi is? Sir?
You know, it's just something very interesting about watching this, you know, because when Nick Shirley was out there knocking on doors, gathering public records and information, checking these places out and showing that these businesses were cheating taxpayers, stealing and committing fraud, the mainstream media was attacking his credibility. They were asking, who is he to be walking around, going into businesses, daycares, asking questions? But now you have news reporters actually doing their job and discovering that these same people Nick Shirley was going after, yeah, okay, it turns out they are trying to hide what they are doing now that they're being exposed. But here's some more.
We tried another Aspen Associates location in Fridley, also raided by federal agents. The door was locked and no one answered, but it's what we discovered on the mailbox.
Oh, interesting.
That tied it all together.
House of Opportunity's business address is listed in that office park in Minneapolis, but here you can see there's a label on the Fridley location here for House of Opportunity as well.
Kind of a game of whack-a-mole.
Lori Swanson served as Minnesota's Attorney General from 2007 to 2019. She oversaw Medicaid fraud prosecutions involving multiple businesses.
It can be a red flag for potential fraud. If you have one business that you think is engaging in fraud, well, it's, potentially then, a sign that maybe they're engaging, in fraud elsewhere.
Swanson says these investigations really follow the money, and we have some of that information. Medicaid reimbursement data obtained by 5 investigates through a public records request shows Aspen Associates billed 3 different high-risk Medicaid services, including the autism program, totaling more than $5.6 million. House of Opportunity billed in 4 high-risk programs for more than $1 million.
Yeah, and so basically you have fraudsters in Minnesota who realized how easy it was to get over. And they thought, why not establish multiple businesses to commit the fraud? That's what it looks like. And so while Democrats wanted to make this out to be a race issue, and you have people in the Somali community in Minnesota who feel attacked, it's not for no reason. Let's get that straight. It's because of the concentration of fraud and where they are finding it. And now you even have an ex-investigator speaking out on just how corrupt it all is. Take a listen.
Hi, Nick. You know, what's most shocking about this is not Jay Swanson's level of candor or the amount of details and facts that he can talk about. It's the account of how Minnesota officials ultimately silenced him and his team. This is a guy who was a state trooper in Minnesota for decades, and he was the head of this fraud, this agency investigating fraud within the state. Ultimately, he says they shut him down after they came up and revealed what they learned. Take a listen.
One day we received a call from a CCAP mother who called to complain that her child care center owner had stopped paying her the monthly cash kickback they had agreed upon. Another day, a former co-owner of a center called to say that he had been cheated out of his share of the fraud proceeds. Yet another day, a fire department called asking if a child care center was still operating because there were never any children or staff at the center. I checked and found that in the last 12 months, we had paid the center approximately $1 million and that they were billing for the care of approximately 90 children at a time during 2 shifts from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., 7 days a week.
Yeah, I just had to stop there because calling up and making a complaint because you didn't receive your fraud kickback is wild. That showed just how bad it was and how normalized it had became. And so this investigator who worked for the state saw what was happening pretty early on. He even said the fraud in Minnesota was being talked about overseas in Somalia. Take a listen.
More than once, I heard an owner or employee respond when we asked where they first learned about the daycare scam. They would say they had first heard about it while in the refugee camp in Kenya. These individuals told us that they had heard you could run the scam in a number of different states, but it was easiest and you could make the most money doing it in Minnesota. When I was shown a text conversation between the owner of the center and a friend, the friend had asked the owner, "How much longer are you going to do the daycare scam?" The owner replied, "Another year or 2. I'm going to buy some nice homes in Nairobi." The owner was on public assistance at this time. They happened to be on vacation in Dubai when this text conversation took place.
Yeah, and so when Democrats try to make it a race issue and use the excuse that it's an attack on the Somali community, that ignores all of the facts, all of the information showing why people were coming to Minnesota in the first place. It wasn't because of the beach weather, that's for certain. Turns out it was the fraud. Color me shocked. And the idea that you could get away with things in Minnesota, unlike any other state.
Now, Swanson says their warnings were ignored. Then the department hired a consultant, ultimately to try and discredit their findings, and all of this would be shoved under the carpet. Nick?
Rich, you also interviewed his colleague, Scott Stillman, exclusively last month. Now that both have spoken out with the damning accounts, what does this mean for Minnesota officials?
Well, it establishes kind of a baseline. Here you have 2 very credible people, Stillman and Swanson, both lifetime investigators. They're saying that this fraud was known in Minnesota as early as 2013, 2014. They were talking about it, retaliated against. And so the implication for officials, Governor Walz, who we've reached out to and has not responded, is it's impossible for them to say they didn't know about this. In fact, when they brought this, Governor Walz's, Department of Human Services ultimately shut down this very team.
You got Tim Walz wants people to believe that he has been tough on crime and taking down fraud from day one. But problem with that is hard to believe any of that because it's nearly impossible for that level of fraud to go on where they're stealing millions, if not billions of dollars they're estimating right now. And public officials have zero clue. None of this gets back to the governor's office. But now you got Tim Walz trying to convince people he's been cracking the whip on fraud this entire time. And J.D. Vance, the fraud czar appointed by Trump, has something to say about that. Take a listen.
As you know, Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota has claimed some credit for the fraud crackdown in Minnesota. Is there credit to be deserved for the governor?
No, not at all, Will. This is like the arsonist trying to claim credit for the work of the fire department because Tim Walz let this fraud happen under his watch. Whether he was complicit in it directly himself or just turned a blind eye towards it, we really did not get much help at all from the governor's office. Where we did actually get some help was from some state, local law enforcement officers who we assigned to the federal task force because the state government wasn't doing anything. So all credit goes to people on the ground, the federal officers, the state officers who are working to uncover this fraud.
Do you expect some type of accountability, beyond political, some type of accountability for Attorney General Ellison or Governor Walz?
Well, we have to follow the law where it leads. And what we know is that there were multiple Minnesota authorities who were turning a blind eye to this fraud. What we don't yet know is whether they knew it was going on as it was going on, but that's one of the things that we're looking at with these investigations. We're not going to, we're not going to let anybody who committed a crime off the hook. And in fact, if you're a senior officer, if you're the attorney general or the governor or any other elected official, we're going to look extra hard at what you knew and when you knew it and how connected your actions were to this fraud scheme. But it's part of the reason why we're serving these warrants, Will, is because, of course, people don't come out and tell you, oh, yeah, I knew that the Quality Leering Center was committing fraud and people were getting rich off of it and I did nothing. People don't say that. So we've got to do the investigatory work to understand what was known, when it was known, and by whom. That's a big part of the reason why the fraud investigation, these warrants that we saw being served all across the city of Minneapolis, why that's such a big deal is because we're finally starting to really get into the nitty-gritty of what we knew, of what people were involved in this fraud scheme. But regardless of whether there was criminal wrongdoing on behalf of the governor, of course, like I said, well, we're going to let the law make those determinations. We know that he turned a blind eye towards this. I mean, you have people, Will, who came into this country, many of them illegally, and 6 months later they're driving Mercedes despite the fact that they don't have a job. That doesn't happen without some defrauding of the American taxpayer. The fact that they turned a blind eye towards it for so long is a scandal. We're also going to find out whether it was criminal.
And that right there will be the challenge, ladies and gentlemen, because politicians are good at covering their tracks and making sure they stay far enough removed and insulated from being caught. And so we have to see if someone talks or if someone like Tim Walz or Ilhan Omar, Keith Ellison, whoever, a public official, they made a mistake that can be tracked and used against them. But let me leave you with Greg Gutfeld in this last clip. Take a listen.
Who knows? Maybe he wants a medal for stopping the fraud so he can put it next to the one he got for eating pizza in Italy during Operation Enduring Freedom. He also blames the fraud on his state being too generous. Sorry, dude, it's not generous when you're giving away other people's money. It didn't come from his bank account, which is why he didn't care. And now he says the buck stops with me.
I've said the buck stops with me. And as I know some of you will take that as an open invitation to play politics with every incident of fraud that takes place here in Minnesota, even though I have to tell you, the statistics show it's happening in red states more than here, but so be it.
If this guy was more full of crap, he'd be a sewage treatment plant. The buck stops with me. No, Timmy, the buck didn't stop with you. It went straight out the door and over to Mogadishu.
Yeah, so let me know what you guys think. As always, I appreciate when you guys chime in. Drop your comments down below. Smash that thumbs up button if you do enjoy the content. Subscribe for more. And as always, until next time.